Hello everybody, and today I'll be ranking the anime that I watched over the summer. Now, I could have been talking about more, but unfortunately I only watched 7, so 7 is all unfortunately that you're going to get. So let's just jump right in. In 7th place we have Super Itch Arrows. Now, this one was kind of interesting. It had a promising premise, but unfortunately it had a lot of cons. It was one that I expected to do really well, but unfortunately it didn't. For one thing, it was a bit of a poorly paced show. It flew by just so quickly. The fight scenes, for as intense as they were supposed to be, just really end in just one punch from main character Redo Enjo. Well, Redo is a nice enough guy. He's really not anything special. I mean, you could substitute him with just about any anime main character. His motivation as well for being a fighter is pretty lackluster and just borderline boring. And it's also just the concept of the show as a whole is a very strange one. It's like a connection. It's like a mixture of Shimoneta World where dirty jokes don't exist in the form of the Kiseichu, mixed with a bit of raunchy high school DD that's heavily censored, and then mix that with the most obvious inspiration, which is Power Rangers, and it all just results in a very odd Saturday morning cartoon mashup that really feels like a Frankenstein's monstrosity. The animation as well in this series just kind of goes off the wall a bit, especially in the penultimate episode. The character design just really feels off. And speaking of characters, the supporting cast is done really dirty in this show. I mean, this is just some poor writing. I mean, Hoshino and Reto have this relationship that is explored rather nicely over the course of the series, but it really doesn't go. Well, it goes somewhere, but the rest of the characters just feel like window dressing. They all have individual episodes that play into the larger story, where they're the focus, but it has no real consequence. It's not played as much as you would think. For example, Mahime's got this relationship at her old girls' school with this person who could be a love interest, but it doesn't go anywhere. And then one of the other characters, whose name I forget, which is just goes to show how little impact they have, she is an erotic artist drawer, and that goes nowhere. I mean, it could if this series got a second season, but within this first season, she leaves almost no impact whatsoever. The one with the biggest is probably Momozono, but that's just because she's a bit of a lust freak with itty bitty titties. And yeah, she just goes absolutely nowhere. I mean, this is a bit of a train wreck, and which is why it's sadly at the bottom of the list. But that being said, there are some pros. There are some pros. Great character designs. The designs are very distinct. You can tell which character is which. They're not blending into the background, especially Hoshino. She's got blonde hair, but it's more like yellow. It's like real yellow, without any tones. And episode 12. Episode 12 for me is exactly what this series should have been. It should have been more like the Saturday morning cartoon that Power Rangers is. Now, I'm no Power Rangers fan, but for me, that episode definitely felt more like what this series should have been. Action based. The group should have been a whole dynamic instead of separated. It felt like this series was just mostly an interplay between Hoshino and Reto rather than a group dynamic. So it felt really good with Mahime becoming a little more prominent in the last episode, but it came a little too late, and that's just really awkward. Um, oh yeah, I forgot to mention this, but the Kisechu threat in this series, they're established to be a big threat. They're trying to get rid of humanity by removing our emotions and removing our desire to reproduce. But the thing is that the threat is lost halfway through the series with the establishment that the Kisechu queen has gone missing, and they get Cha-Cha, her daughter, on their side. But the thing is that by doing that, you remove the threat, and that's really awkward. So throughout much of the series, it's just the drama between the characters, and it's really awkward, and that's why it's at the bottom of this list. It's just a bit of a mess. In sixth place is, and this is going to be awkward, but this is actually a tie. So really, number 6 and number 5 are really interchangeable, but for the purposes of this video, they will be separated. In sixth place, we have Rent a Girlfriend, and in fifth place, we've got Uzaki Wants to Hang Out, or Uzaki-chan Wants to Hang Out. I've mentioned the first because of the English dub pronunciation. Awkward, I know. Yeah, there's a bit of a controversy, but we're not going to address that. So, Rent a Girlfriend and Uzaki. Now, the reason why they're almost on par with each other are for various different reasons, but they led me to the same conclusion. But first, let's just talk about them as individuals. So, Rent a Girlfriend, what are the positives? Well, both shows are actually based on college. Super 8 Heroes was just another high school anime, whereas Rent and Uzaki, I should probably say Uzaki because the English dub is a little controversial. Both of them are college age students, so it's always nice to have that representation instead of every show being a high school show or middle school show. That gets boring after a while, especially as fans grow older. So it's nice to have something where there aren't the limitations that usually come with a high school show. These characters have already moved on and are at university. Science types fell in love, so they have to research it, or I'm really butchering that title. Science types fell in love, so they tried to prove it is one of my favorite shows from this year because it was college based. So Rent a Girlfriend, what are the positives? Well, for one thing, it's an MC that actually builds his own drama. He causes the drama as opposed to him just solving everybody's issues. He's got his own issues to solve, which I think is really nice instead of the typical character that just gets dropped in from his everyday life and he himself is not really dramatic. Kazi pretty much created his own misunderstanding by pretending a rental girlfriend was a girlfriend when he himself really wants a girlfriend. Now he has to play pretend. It's actually kind of interesting to see that he caused it himself. And this is a show that's kind of not afraid to talk about the more raunchier sides of being an adult, hooking up, sex, and all that, Some shows shy away from that for the most part, especially the MCs. But this is an MC that actually embraces that, which is kind of nice to see. And generally, the characterizations of the likes of Chizuru, Ruka, and Sumi are all well established, and I like the fact that it does make a few nice references to the times, as this is a very contemporary-based show. I believe it's set in 2017, because Chizuru is established to be born in 1998, and she's 19 in the series at the moment. So I think that's pretty nice. And what I mean by that it's nice that it makes addressment of the contemporary times is the fact that it does address that even though you're past 18, the drama and the teen angst doesn't leave you, which I like. But that being said, that does contribute to some of the cons. This series is a little bit overly melodramatic. I mean, Kazuya is a wreck of a protagonist. I mean, this guy is a snot-nosed brat. Listen, your problems, your teen angst doesn't end when you're 18. It'll continue into your 20s, and maybe even into your 30s. But Kazuya is just a bad representation of males. I mean, this guy's an embarrassment. He is snot-nosed, he lies. For a guy who grew up in a family that was self-made, his grandmother carried their business, and his parents now run that business. He's just a wreck. I mean, this guy is just so fake. His hair is fake. He actually is normally black-haired. He dyed it. And he's generally putting on an act, and he's so unsubtle about it. I mean, this guy lacks any smoothness. He's not a good character. Now, I don't actively believe that every character has to be, a viewer insert. I like the fact that an MC can be their own individual person. But Kazuya is just not the way it goes. I mean, this guy's one horny bastard. He constantly thinks with the thing between his legs. It's disgusting. I mean, and not only that, but he's extremely pathetic. I mean, this guy lusts after mommy like no tomorrow. But despite the fact that she, one, is abusive, emotionally abusive, she broke up with him, and yet he's still simping for her. What an absolute idiot. I mean, this is absolutely just disgusting. Not only that, but by doing that, I don't necessarily read into every show that I watch, but because I'm taking a film class at college, which is discussing, ethnic images and so on and so forth, I do kind of now look at some of the things I've been watching lately with a bit more of a critical eye. And I gotta say, what Rent a Girlfriend has to say is really disgusting. I mean, every time Kazuya's out in public with one of the rental girlfriends, whether that's Ruka, Asumi, or Chizuru, every guy, and I think even the women, are like making passing remarks, and the fact that I don't think that they're necessarily thinking it, but they're saying it out loud, is a really poor perception of men. I mean, just Jesus Christ. I mean, do people in Japan? I'm sure this is not how it works in reality, but holy shit. I mean, the fact that these guys sexually assault Sumi, like they lift up her skirt, and they do it in a public space is just gross. I mean, there is social commentary, and then there's just being plain disgusting. And yeah, this series just goes into that. And not only that is that disgusting, the music is a bit disgusting. The scoring is really awkward in this show. It's hard to grasp the emotion when you got so much contemporary music just blaring in the background. And not only that, but the way it's animated is a little awkward. There's this weird in the corners, like here. For some reason, it looks like the paper got crumpled up, like it's taking a cue out of a page or something, or maybe it got wet and was allowed to just naturally sun dry. But it just makes for a very odd visual aesthetic, and it's a bit difficult to buy into a show that's just got this. It's a bit garish looking, and the color designs are a little awkward. But that being said, it is well acted, and the characters do look for the part, and they are well designed. But the only problem is Aruka Sarashina, who was originally waifu 16. How does a 16-year-old work as a rental girlfriend when you're supposed to work with adults? That's just weird. And then there's Uzaki, and again, college-based. The dialogue is great. I like the fact that it's just about hanging out and like the little interplay between the loner Sakurai and the more outgoing Hana Uzaki, and the little antics they get up to in their lives is pretty fun, especially over the summer. And it's quite the opposite of Rental Girlfriend, whereas Rental Girlfriend is very dramatic. Uzaki lacks that drama, so in other words, you're not dealing with that stupid main character like Kazuya, who's constantly frustrating me. Sakurai is just a very down-to-earth person, and, Hana's got her issues, but, generally she's more enjoyable than most of the dramatic girls who are a bit plotty in Rental Girlfriend. But, however, despite the fact that I enjoy Uzaki for having no drama, it's the lack of drama that really doesn't make this series all that compelling to watch. And what little drama it has are just like little pot shots. It's very inconsequential. At one point halfway through the series, Uzaki turns 20, and that's the legal drinking age in Japan, so she goes out with Sakurai and gets absolutely wasted, and the next morning she has her hangover and then she pukes. All that stuff. And she feels guilty about ruining his futon, Sakurai's futon, because she puked all over it. So Sakurai has to throw it out, and it's just a hilarious moment before the end credits at the end of the episode. But the thing is that then Uzaki spends the next episode moping about that because she feels guilty for what she did, and Sakurai has to cheer her up and take her to this fireworks festival. And while that is a nice way of exploring their backstory, because they are established to have been on the swimming team back in high school before Sakurai graduated and went to college, and then Uzaki followed him a year later. Well, that is a nice backstory. It feels really contrived way to go about it. It's just back to the status quo the moment Uzaki cheers up. A lot of the pot shots for drama are just really inconsequential. There's a cliffhanger in the penultimate episode where Uzaki shows up at Sakurai's apartment. It's dark, it's rainy, for some reason he didn't turn the lights on. And she's crying, she's all wet because she was out in the rain, and she goes, I can't hang out anymore. And you think to yourself, whoa, this could be something. She just forgot to do her summer homework, and now she's got to catch up for the week. Very, very inconsequential, very, very nothing. It's a series I describe like water. Only you're not thirsty, you're not You didn't just come from a 3 mile exercise or anything. You've just drank 5 minutes ago and you just need to drink again. It's a very lackluster show, and episode 10 especially is just a bit of a weird fest. They visit this place called Otri, which is the birthplace of manga. While it is a nice episode, and I gotta say, it's really well animated. It kind of looks like the production team went there and took pictures and then animated the characters over it. Which, if they didn't, really good job. I gotta say, I was convinced watching that episode. But it's a very inconsequential series. The status quo of the relationship between Sakurai and Uzaki, despite the fact that we can tell that there's going to be romantic tension, the romantic tension really goes nowhere. I mean, the whole joke is that Otri is actually a place where couples are formed, and it's a place for good luck. And to the people watching them who aren't familiar with them, they look like a lovey-dovey couple instead of bickering friends. And while you see that affects the characters, soon enough they get over it, and it's just back to the usual antics. They're trying to outdo each other playing games. And it's that surface level of no development that really just kind of bugs me on the inside. It's not objectively wrong. And it's kind of sweet to see a series so simple. But the inner reviewer within me just tells me that just does nothing to entice the viewer. And it's much like Rent a Girlfriend in that sense. Despite the fact that Rent a Girlfriend does have a story, its level of drama, it's stupid drama, and its characters, especially Kazuya, who's so dumb and usually landing himself into such bad situations, doing it himself and being an idiot while at it, the fact that he can't tell the truth, he can't be honest. This man is a 20-year-old. Again, I emphasize, your problems don't end at 20. But the fact that you have grown up in the 2000s, like I'm 22 at the moment, the fact that you have been growing up in this time period, dude, and you don't know the first thing about how to treat a rent, like you pay subscription service to like Blockbuster. That just shows how old I am. Blockbuster or Netflix, you get the DVD, well, when you could get a DVD, you send it back, you borrowed it, you didn't get to keep it. The fact that Kazuya is so selfish with Chizuru, and even stalks at one point, is just, it makes for a very numbing experience, much like Uzaki, where at one point I actually fell behind by a few weeks and I caught up. Episode 11 had just come out. I had been falling behind, I think, since episode 7. But I just found myself so completely bored. And with Rent a Girlfriend, it's the same thing. Like, you can watch it, but it doesn't have the rewatchability, much like Uzaki. And so for various different reasons, it just results in me having the same conclusion about both of them. They are both subjectively poor. Objectively, they have their merits, but Rent a Girlfriend is too dramatic. Uzaki lacks drama and has like nothing going for it. They're series that I would say watch, but that depends on what you expect of them and how you take what they are. I really just, I cannot recommend either based on the pros and the cons that I find within them. I'll certainly watch them, but to tell someone who is trying to ask you what you like about them, I struggle to really make a conclusion. In fourth place now, oh boy, if you're watching this from Twitter, if you know me on Twitter at said reviews, I've been linking that. Oh boy, you all are probably going to put me on the end of a stake, but in fourth place we have Railgun T, the third season of Railgun. Now before you put me on the end of a stake and you take a pitchfork to me, let me just emphasize, I love that we had Railgun again. It was meant to air in the spring season, but because of certain events, it got delayed by many weeks, by months even, between like bunches of episodes coming out. So let me just emphasize first, it's excellent to have Railgun. After the arguable failings of Index 3, it's nice to have this series that is generally more well-paced than Index. JC staff takes really good care of Railgun. And it's always nice to have Makoto Mitsuka. I like the fact that we get to establish Misaki Shokuho. She's an important character in Index to an extent. So it's nice to see her in Railgun to really like flesh her out before New Testament comes out, if it comes out soon. Um, there were rumors that this was meant to be another year of Tuaru, but production delays have put a bit of a block in that. And it's always nice to see Kuroka. I really like Kuroka. She is probably my favorite girl in the entire series, in both Index and Railgun. Uh, yeah, she's always fantastic. You really get the sense that Kamachi did want to make the spin-off, the main spin-off for the series, about Kuroko instead of Makoto. Because Kuroko just gets so much great action in both series. I mean, she fights Awaki, she fights members of Skill Out in Railgun. She's generally fantastic. In fact, actually, a Genesis Testament new cover for the third book has come out, and she's the focus on that, interestingly. And I like the fact that we get to explore a bit more about the members of Item who free the Battle Royale arc of Season 3, where it mixes things up a little bit. And I generally like all of it. It's just fantastic. But the cons, oh boy, this is where, for me, it just lacks some of that Railgun cohesiveness. The thing is that I really enjoyed Railgun Season 1 because, for me, it felt like it had all the fantasy and the science fiction action that Index had, but it mixed it with, well, I generally am not a fan of schoolgirl shows. I feel like it really works in showcasing the science side of Academy City, as opposed to Index, which shows more both sides of magic and science. I'll elaborate on this, on the significance I feel of Index when I do a bigger review of it, if I get around to that. But I like the fact that it's a schoolgirl show, and I really like the judgment aspect of Season 1. It's got a very investigative police drama feel to it, in the same vein as Hawaii Five-0 or Z-Cars. And so I really liked it as a result of that. But this time, it feels just completely unearned for the Dear My Friends ending to the season. It felt too separated. The Daihase Festival is easily the strongest arc of the two arcs explored in this season, but the issue is that the characters spend all the time separated. Makoto is completely on her own with Misaki. That's because Kuroko, Uehara, and Satin got their memories wiped. And so there's less of the dynamic explored. And then in Dream Ranker, Satin goes off to hang out with Frenda for a bit. Kuroko and Uehara, but arguably it's a Kuroko arc, goes off with Miyama to do the whole thing about the precognitive to prevent bad things from happening. And then Makoto just hangs out with Kinohara, and then she goes hang out with Misaki and goes fights a big giant Godzilla made out of concrete. The individual arcs work amazingly, but it doesn't contribute to, it makes the Dear My Friends ending feel very under, and that's because the characters spend so much time away from each other and not really established as a group effort. They're all doing their own thing, that it makes it feel completely unearned. The reason why this works in Season 1 is because Level Upper concerned the relationship between Espers and the non-Espers, the Level Zeros, the people who didn't have special powers. So it makes the significance of Uehara realizing how left out Satin feels. Kuroko and Makoto learn that they have left her out. And the fight they have to preserve their dignity as level zeros and prevent them from being experimented on and taken advantage of, it really works because it feels like a dynamic. And as much as I don't like the Sonic Party arc because it messes with the continuity of Makoto in Index. For as much as I dislike that arc, it works in Railgun S because the Sisters arc saw her doing everything on her own. She had to learn that she can't ask for help when the challenge is too big. And so it makes the ending feel worth it in Silent Party because she was able to ask Kuroko for help, Uehara Satin, who reached out to all these other characters in order to stop the study group from destroying Academy City. So that feels earned. That feels like it's dramatic. Like, you see the tension that comes from her disappearing. And that's just missing in Season 1. Like, nobody contributed to the whole doppelganger thing. I understand that Dreammaker is a big giant arc in terms of timeline. It extends beyond what original Testament Index covers. So if the story can continue, I'm curious as to where it goes. I mean, I'm probably sure it has something to do with Indian poker, but the way this series just ends off on a feel-good note feels completely under. There was no cliffhanger to learn that, oh hey, is there more to this story? No. They hint that Indian poker is endangering because it's showing too much behind the scenes security stuff that would normally be not learned by outsiders, but the way they handle it just feels a little too soft. It feels like a soft punch. I feel like this season was just a bit of placebo rather than anything special, so it's a bit jumbled in that regard. So yeah, still a favorite. It was originally going to be in third place, but I kept thinking about it, and I decided that, yeah, I don't like this as much as I would have liked. In third place, we have, oh boy. This was a series I only recently watched this year, ReZero Season 2 Part 1. Now, I must mention Part 1 because these usually are divided up into Parts 1 and 2 of the same season. So what are the bonuses here? Well, we learn more about the witches. I love the world building. We finally get to meet these representations of the 7 deadly sins. The drama is impressive. Subaru's got his work cut out for him this season. I mean, wow. You've got the attack on the mansion and all of its residents. You've got Rem out of action. You've got the ongoing story of who's going to rule Lagunica soon in the background. You've got to save people from the sanctuary, restore the relationships between the half-humans and the humans, and then you gotta do this all while facing the threat of the Great Rabbit. The stakes are high, but on the flip side, you do kind of gotta wonder, such stakes this high, I mean, I don't doubt that they could, but you gotta wonder, how else are they gonna raise the stakes after all this drama? I mean, that's gonna be difficult, I think. And that does sort of contribute to a con that I have with this series, in that it is a bit of a slow burn. It feels like Subaru kept revisiting the same checkpoint over and over again. Every time you learn something, you don't get it wrong. It's amazing. Learning that Beatrice is actually a spirit and that she's been tortured for so long with how long she's been trapped by her contract, that she needs release, is impressive, but it's a lot to cover. I mean, how do you get over this? I mean, you gotta go through the trials and revisit a lot of painful things. It's so heavy. I mean, don't get it wrong, that's the point of the series, but my god, like, wow, how do you overcome this and then expect lightning to strike the bottle again? Whew. But yeah, it's still very good. Third place is still excellent. It was originally second place, actually, but well, we'll get to that. But yeah, it's generally very good. Subaru's background and what we learned about, like, what led him to the point that we saw him in the first episode is impressive. And I do like that. And it's well acted. Never doubt the acting of this series. It's fantastic. It's kind of interesting to hear Kuroko Shirai's voice actor voicing a different character in the same season. Yeah, generally very good, very dramatic, but a little too dramatic almost. Very monologue heavy. Echidna's final statement in the penultimate episode of the Part 1 season. It is very good, but it does feel like it's filled with too many vague ideas, if that makes any sense. But yeah, generally not bad. Third place, ReZero Season 2 Part 1. Fantastic stuff. In second place, we've got, oh boy, this was originally fourth place, but I kept thinking about it. And I thought to myself, I really love this. We've got the Misfit of Demon King Academy. Oh boy. This is One Punch Man, but serious. This show does not give one damn. Anos is the Demon King. He is reincarnated, but I just love how just nonchalant he is. He does not care. I mean, he does care that, history has forgotten him, that somebody has stolen his identity and pretended they are the Demon King instead of him. But he's so nonchalant about it. I mean, he doesn't care that, oh, hey, I was reborn, I'm now a child to these parents who aren't really my parents, but I'll roll with it. Oh, I gotta go to school in order to prove that I'm the Demon King. I'll roll with it. It's absolutely funny. The comedy in this series is golden. I mean, this is some hilarious stuff. It's so over the top. I mean, the fact that Anos not only kills the guy with just the pulsing from his heart, then he resurrects him, then kills him over and over again is. This series tells you that this guy is the most powerful character in the entire world, and he knows it and he relishes it. He picks up a castle like it's nothing, tosses it, catches it again, and then flings it across a forest. It is just so hilarious. And I like that there's some political undertones in the form of the hybrids. That is interesting. It says a bit about Japanese society, but Mother's Basement covered that better than I can, so I'll let him take the floor on that one. Go watch his video on it. It can be argued that being a power fantasy and lacking any sort of like the usual shonen drama, like, you know, you introduce this powerful character and then at the end of the season you establish that he can't do everything. That is usually a proper story structure, establishing that a character can have a weakness. So by having Anos be that powerful that he can overcome almost everything and anything, it does lower the stakes a bit. But I think that by doing this, it's a so bad it's good concept, or it's so bad that or it's so good that it's good, that it plays itself so deadly serious, as opposed to One Punch Man, which addresses the foolishness of being the most powerful, whereas here it relishes being the most powerful, but it does so with good intentions, and I think that really comes across, especially in episode 12, where, you know, as cliche as it is, love does win at the end of the day. It's like, screw war, peace is where it's at, and I think that is its strongest playing card, is that it is such a good promotion for that. A generally very well done series. I got no complaints. It's so much fun. I can't fault it. It's my number 2. It was almost my number 1, but I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure this is going to be a big surprise. Number 1, Food Wars Season 5. Now, let's get it right out of the way. Is this a perfect season? No, it skips over a lot of what was enjoyable. The cooking, it's generally very rushed. What was usually just artistic expression of how over the top the characters were suddenly becomes the literal way they cook. So it is a little bit of a wreck like that. But to be fair, it wasn't going to be a perfect ending. What any source material reader will tell you, that this series absolutely derailed following the defeat of Central. Everything that came after what was adapted in season 4 was a bit poor in a lot of people's eyes. So it was no surprise. The writer does admit that they could have ended things off with the Central arc, but because they had reestablished the interpersonal relationship between the characters, particularly Soma and Erina, it would have felt wrong to leave that unexplored, as well as the question that Joichiro posed within the first 2 episodes, where he remarks to Soma that, hey, find yourself a lady you want to cook for, that's the secret to becoming a good chef. It did feel like that question needed to be answered in another arc. But I heard the way he went about it was a little bit questionable. But for me, what makes it number 1? It's the symbolism of the series. I'll explore this maybe a little bit more, but in summary, the first season is establishing that the elites are not the only people who get to judge how good food is. Common people like Soma, Akira, people who have come from unprivileged backgrounds, who only work at like street stalls and street pubs and diners like Megumi or Ryo Kurikiba, they can still be, you know, even more powerful than your average elite chef that comes from a high-rise restaurant or whatever. And then you have the little fight at the autumn of elections, and then you learn, like, there are differences in capabilities and power, and so you learn that you grapple with the aftermath of having to fight people who are on the same level as you, And then the third season is overcoming people trying to capture imagination and creating food in the form of Azami and his central idea. And I love this season that establishes that the wasteland of food is an infinite wasteland. There is no limit. Like, I'm sure there are limits in the real world as to what you can do, but the fact that you can do such out of this world things like using poison in order to enhance your food, a little bit ridiculous, but this symbolic representation that food is endless and the pursuit of gourmet is endless, wonderfully symbolic. Learning about Aaron and Soma's mothers are really amazing. It's bittersweet when you realize that Soma's mom is gone, but you learn the significance of like why Joichiro got back into food, about why Soma loves food so much. I love learning about the origin of the squid, as well as the squid in the mouth, as well as the scar that he has, and it's just really bittersweet. The idea that the god tongue will eventually despair is an interesting challenge to overcome, and just generally the idea that food is endless and that this entire series, the reason the 92nd generation has happened, all because of Senzaimer, who wanted to teach both his daughter and granddaughter to love food again. That food, you know, gourmet food does exist out in this world, but it's endless. Like, you think that there's a cap as to how good food can be. No. This season establishes it can go on forever and ever, and I love that. I love the ending moment. It's not as fantastic as you would thought. They did hint that in the manga they were meant to do a full-on nude scene, but whatever. But the idea that Soma could finally, once more, he brought Erina to the point where she almost says food was delicious, but the fact that he does it and he can do it without, in his own style, is really impressive, and it's very subtle. It's a very nuanced ending. The idea that Soma cooks one final disgusting dish is hilarious. That's with this whole gag in the first season, but it establishes on such a open-ended note that, you know, what will he cook for the god tongue that she will enjoy, you know, and the meeting of all his friends at his diner, his family's diner, him returning home after going off to discover more flavors to implement into his cooking, is a wonderfully, just very optimistic ending. It's not quite what we wanted, but I think it's really what would have worked for this series. And just for that, for its symbolic representation, I think that Food Wars has to be number one in the summer anime list. Objectively not great, but subjectively, I think it's fantastic. I think this is wonderful. And that is why it's my number one. So what were your guys' picks for the best shows of the season, of the summer season? Which ones did you watch? Which ones do you think I should have watched? I would have watched Oregairu, but man, the second season looks so depressing. I avoided that. And I have to catch up on Fire Force in order to watch the second season. I kind of lazed a bit, and I'm still a bit lazy about it. But I'll try to finish that on one of these days. Yeah, this is Z Deister signing out.